The history of money, from ancient coins to digital currency. The invisible force. Imagine waking up tomorrow and discovering that money no longer exists. No cash in your wallet, no money in your bank account, no credit cards, no digital payments. You go to a store, but the cashier cannot tell you how much anything costs. You try to buy food, but there is no accepted way to pay. You offer your phone, you offer your watch, you even offer something valuable from your home. But the seller asks one simple question. What will you give me in exchange? For most of human history, this was a difficult problem. People needed things from one another. Farmers had grain, hunters had meat, craftspeople had tools. But what happened when a farmer wanted shoes and the shoemaker did not need grain? This problem helped create one of the most important inventions in human history: money. Money allowed people to trade with strangers. It helped measure value. It allowed wealth to be stored. And eventually, it became the foundation of entire economies. But money did not begin with paper bills or bank accounts. Its story began thousands of years ago. This is the history of money, the invention that changed the way humanity traded, worked, and built civilization. Before money. Long before coins existed, humans traded through barter. The basic idea was simple. You had something I wanted, I had something you wanted, so we exchanged them. A farmer might trade grain for tools. A fisherman might trade fish for clothing. A farmer might exchange livestock for other goods. Barter worked in small communities, but it had a major weakness. Both sides had to want what the other person possessed. Economists sometimes call this the double coincidence of wants. Imagine you have a basket of wheat and want a pair of shoes. You find a shoemaker. But the shoemaker does not want wheat. He wants meat. So you must find someone who wants wheat and has meat. Then perhaps that person wants something else. The larger and more complicated a society became, the more difficult direct barter became. Human beings needed something that everyone could recognize as valuable. That need eventually led to early forms of money. The first forms of money. Money did not appear in one single place at one exact moment. Different societies used different objects as mediums of exchange. Some used livestock. Others used grain. Salt became valuable in many regions. Shells were used as money in parts of the world. Metal objects also became important because they were durable and could be transported. One particularly famous example was cowrie shells. Small shells could be counted, carried, and exchanged. In other societies, metals such as copper, silver, and gold became increasingly important. Metal had several advantages. It was durable, it could be divided, it could be transported, and some metals were relatively scarce. But there was still a problem. If every piece of metal had a different weight or purity, people had to constantly measure and test it. The solution was revolutionary. Instead of simply using pieces of metal, governments could produce standardized pieces. And that brought humanity to one of the most important developments in monetary history: coins. The birth of coins. Some of the earliest widely recognized coinage appeared in the ancient world around the 7th century BCE, particularly in Lydia, in what is now Western Turkey. These early coins were made from electrum, a naturally occurring mixture of gold and silver. They carried official markings. Those markings helped communicate something extremely important. This piece of metal has a recognized value. The idea spread. Coins made trade easier. A merchant no longer had to weigh every piece of metal from scratch. A traveler could carry standardized units of value. Governments could collect taxes. Soldiers could be paid. markets could expand. The Roman Empire later developed an enormous monetary system using coins made from different metals. Coins traveled with armies, merchants, and traders across vast distances. Money was becoming more than a tool for local exchange. It was becoming an important part of government and empire. But coins had limitations. Large transactions required heavy quantities of metal. Transporting enormous amounts of gold or silver was risky. Eventually, another form of money would change the system again: paper money.
The rise of paper money. Paper money has a long history, but one of the most important early developments took place in China. As trade expanded, carrying large amounts of metal coins became inconvenient. Chinese merchants and governments developed forms of paper-based payment that could represent monetary value. During the Song dynasty, government-issued paper currency became increasingly important. Paper had an enormous advantage. It was lightweight. A merchant could carry a large amount of purchasing power without carrying a heavy bag of coins. But paper money created a new challenge. Why should a piece of paper have value? The answer depended on trust. People had to believe that the issuer would honor the note. Governments, therefore, became deeply involved in money. They could issue currency, they could collect taxes, and they could establish rules governing monetary systems. Over time, paper money spread beyond China. Eventually, it became one of the defining features of modern economies. But another institution was becoming equally important: the bank.
The rise of banking. Banks have roots stretching back thousands of years. Ancient societies already had systems for lending, storing valuables, and recording debts. But banking became increasingly sophisticated as commerce expanded. Medieval and Renaissance Europe saw the growth of powerful banking families and financial institutions. One of the most famous examples was the Medici family of Florence. Bankers helped merchants move money across regions. They provided loans, they kept records, they facilitated international trade. Banks solved another important problem. Money did not always have to physically move from one place to another. A financial record could represent a payment. This was a major step toward the financial system we recognize today. Banks eventually became central to governments and economies. They helped finance businesses, they supported trade, and they provided governments with access to credit. But banking also introduced new risks. If people lost confidence in a bank, they might all demand their money at once, and that could create a financial crisis. Money had become powerful, but it was also becoming increasingly dependent on something that cannot be physically held: trust.
The modern monetary system. For centuries, many currencies were linked in some way to precious metals, especially gold and silver. Gold was attractive because it was scarce, durable, and widely valued. Governments and central banks accumulated gold reserves. Paper notes could sometimes be exchanged for a specified amount of precious metal. This created a connection between currency and physical wealth. But the modern economy became far larger and more complicated. Governments needed flexibility during wars and economic crises. The relationship between paper currency and gold changed repeatedly. During the 20th century, many countries gradually moved away from direct convertibility into gold. In 1971, the United States ended the dollar's convertibility into gold for foreign governments. The international monetary system entered a new era. Modern national currencies became primarily fiat money. Fiat money does not depend on a fixed amount of gold stored somewhere. Its value depends largely on confidence, government institutions, economic activity, and monetary policy. In other words, modern money is supported by something incredibly powerful: trust.
Credit cards and digital money.
By the 20th century, money was becoming increasingly electronic. Banks developed systems that allowed people to transfer funds without physically moving cash. Then came the credit card. Credit cards transformed consumer spending. Instead of carrying large amounts of cash, people could use a small plastic card. Transactions could be recorded electronically. The internet pushed this transformation even further. Online banking allowed people to move money from computers. Then smartphones made digital payments even easier. Today, a person can purchase something with a phone in seconds. The transaction may involve no physical money at all. The money exists primarily as numbers recorded in financial systems. This represents a remarkable transformation. For thousands of years, money was something people could physically hold. Now, much of the world's money exists digitally. But the story was about to become even more controversial.
Cryptocurrency. In 2009, a new idea entered the financial world: Bitcoin. Bitcoin was introduced by the mysterious figure known as Satoshi Nakamoto. Its goal was radically different from traditional money. Instead of depending on a central bank or government to maintain the system, Bitcoin used a decentralized network and a technology known as blockchain. Transactions could be recorded on a shared digital ledger. Supporters saw cryptocurrency as a new form of financial freedom. Critics questioned its volatility, regulation, environmental impact, and practical usefulness as money. Regardless of where someone stands on cryptocurrency, its appearance represented an important moment. For the first time, digital technology was challenging traditional ideas about what money should be. Money no longer had to be a coin. It did not have to be paper. It did not even necessarily have to be issued by a government. The definition of money was being debated again.
What gives money valuable? Why does a piece of paper have purchasing power? Why does a number displayed inside a banking app represent something you can use to buy food, a house, or a car? The answer is complicated. Money works because people believe that other people will accept it. A currency is useful because it is widely recognized. Governments support monetary systems through laws and institutions. Central banks manage important parts of the financial system. Businesses accept money because they expect to use it again. And individuals accept it because they trust that others will accept it from them. Money is therefore more than an object. It is a social system of trust. That may be one of the most important discoveries in the history of money. The true power of money does not come from the paper, metal, or computer screen. It comes from the collective belief that it has value.
The future of money. So where does money go from here? The future may be increasingly digital. Cash is already becoming less important in many economies. Mobile payments are expanding. Digital banking is becoming normal. Governments are exploring central bank digital currencies. Cryptocurrencies continue to evolve. Artificial intelligence and new financial technologies may also change how people save, borrow, invest, and make payments. But the fundamental purpose of money may remain surprisingly familiar. Money allows people to exchange value. It provides a way to measure prices, and it allows wealth to be stored for the future. The technology may change, the form may change, but the basic problem remains the same. How can billions of people exchange value efficiently? Humanity has been answering that question for thousands of years, and the answer has never stopped evolving.
The story of money. The history of money is really the history of human cooperation. We began with barter. We developed objects that could serve as money. We created coins. We invented paper currency. We built banks. We developed credit.
we created electronic payments. And now we are experimenting with digital currencies. Money helped small villages become markets. Markets became cities. Cities became nations. And nations became interconnected global economies. Money created enormous wealth, but it also created debt, inequality, financial crises, and political struggles. It has been used to build civilizations and to finance wars. It has changed how people work, trade, save, and dream about the future. And perhaps the most fascinating thing about money is that its value ultimately depends on something invisible: trust. A coin, a banknote, a bank balance, a digital payment. They are all different forms of the same human idea: a promise that value can be exchanged. For thousands of years, that promise has changed shape, and it is still changing. The next chapter of the story may not be made of paper or metal. It may exist entirely in digital networks. But whatever form it takes, money will continue to shape human civilization.
This is the history of money, the invention that changed the world.